Hello, everybody. Welcome to AZ Security. My name is Ewelina Paczkowska. I'm a security cloud architect, and today I have a special guest, and it's Ewelina. Ewelina, welcome back. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Of course, yeah. Thanks very much for having me back on the show.
You're welcome.
My name is Ewelina Paczkowska. I'm one of the solution architects at a company called Threatscape. Also, as of the 1st of December 2025, I'm also a Microsoft MVP in the Purview category. Yes, that's a big win. There's only about 6 or 7 of us females in the Microsoft Purview category. So really, really proud of that achievement. As part of my day-to-day job, I just work with M365 security and compliance solutions. So I do a lot of projects around AI security or data security and data compliance. And apart from that, I'm also one of the co-organizers of the Microsoft 365 security and compliance user group, which I co-organize with two of my colleagues, William Francilet and Ru Campbell. So shout out to them if they're watching.
Cool. Yeah. Wow. Congratulations, first of all, with your MVP status. That's a big win. So,
Thank you very much.
yeah, it's
You
great.
know what it's like. I mean, an
Yeah,
MVP and an MCT as well. So not
true.
an easy, not an easy task, but hopefully gives me just a little bit more credibility with things that I do and the content that I publish online.
Definitely. And you're big in the news on LinkedIn as well. And within a few weeks, I can say it's on MC to MC, right? Speaking there.
Correct. Yeah. So I will be in Belgium for anyone watching and willing to connect. Just don't be shy. Feel free to come up and have a chat.
Cool. For today, we have a new topic. We touch upon the securing AI apps and agents. Can you take us with you?
Sure, yeah. So I think this is something very hot right now. A lot of people have a lot of interest in that, but they might not be sure where to start, where to look. I think Ignite 2025 was also pretty overwhelming. I mean, if you look at the book of news from Ignite 2025, if you look for the word AI or agent or agentic, I think it's got like over 400 different matches. So it can be pretty overwhelming, even for people within the cybersecurity space, for people like us who try to stay on top of all the changes and the announcements. But there are so many different agents popping up in Microsoft 365 portals, right? So very hard to stay on top of them and very hard to know where you actually should be looking. Obviously, when it comes to access to those AI applications and agents, a lot of that would be based on the actual user permission. So if a user has access to a specific content, whether it's setting within SharePoint or OneDrive, we would be looking like things like sensitivity labels, encryption, SharePoint permissions, and that's essentially what gives the end user access to those. But if you kind of leave it wide open, if you don't really utilize encryption, if you share links with anyone, if you don't have any protection mechanisms, it can very quickly get to a point where having those AI agents and AI applications within your organization without proper security and governance guardrails potentially might risk to very serious data exfiltration. And then we all know what happens when that data exfiltration happens, specifically if you're an organization and then you end up in the news, right? So, very
You don't
serious
want to go there.
repercussions to your reputation and so on. Exactly. No one wants to end up in the news because of something like that. And obviously, now with all the different AI acts and so on, you do need to report it. So you cannot just keep it as a secret. Cool. So, what I want to cover today is just to give you some of the gotchas that maybe are very hard to find within Microsoft's documentation, some of the settings you should be looking out for, and show you some of the policies that you can actually put in place and deploy to your end users or your end users' devices to make sure that if you do have visibility in place, if you do have some AI agents or some AI applications in place, whether this is something that you are fully controlling with proper licensing, like Microsoft 365 license or Microsoft Copilot for Studio license, that at least that data is secure and you have a full control over that. So if that's okay with you, Dinant, I would like to share my screen and just
Yeah,
take you through some of the main M365 portals just to show you where to look for that stuff and so on.
cool.
Awesome. So let me just share my screen in here and we will begin in the main M365 admin center, which everyone can find at admin.microsoft.com. So just to take you through some of the settings, again, we're currently in the main Microsoft 365 admin center, so admin.microsoft.com. Once you've got permissions to actually end up in this specific place, couple of things that I really want to show you at the beginning before we even go and look some of the other settings. So how do people can actually end up being able to set up AI agents or AI applications? How do they actually get access to that, even though you might not actually be paying for those specific licenses, right? So when we go through the settings on the left-hand side here in the pane and then go over to the organizational settings, couple of options on the services tab in here. So first of all, we want to make sure that the setting for the self-service trials and purchases, right? So this is something key. By default, Microsoft decides for you that all the self-service settings are actually enabled for anyone within the organization, so that your end user, if you are not paying for the likes of M365 Copilot license, or whether it's Power Automate or Copilot Studio and so on, someone can just start that trial on behalf of your organization, or they can go and set up their own agent. So this is definitely something that you and your organization should be looking at. And unfortunately, this is something that you have to check periodically because this is a setting at this present moment. So my recommendation in here is to go through all the products that your organization has purchased, or maybe there are some trials here that Microsoft has given you and added to your tenant, even without you maybe fully knowing about it. And that you go through each one of the SKU, each one of the subscription type or a product type, and then decide whether people can actually grab those licenses, whether they can start trials on behalf of your organization. So for each one of those products, those items, you then get to determine whether, this is something that is allowed for anyone within your organization, whether you want to maybe just allow trials only or do not allow. And you do it for each one of those items in here. So that's kind of tip number one, because that's how people can end up with having licenses that maybe you haven't purchased yourself. And if you're wondering how did someone ended up being able to set up, let's say, a Copilot Studio agent without you approving that, this might be one of the reasons how they ended up in this specific position. Another option in here that I really want to show you is, again, if we go back to that organization and settings pane, and then we're still in the services tab, if I scroll down to the bottom here, I've got an option for the user-owned apps and services. So over here, apart from obviously controlling the access to the Office store, we've got these two specific settings over here at the bottom. So first of all, we've got starting trials on behalf of the organization. So that is kind of linked to what I previously just shown you. So, apart from just them grabbing that trial for themselves, they can actually kick off a trial on behalf of your entire organization, which is definitely not something that you and your organization would want to do. And another thing here at the bottom is the auto claim licenses option. So if you've got Copilot licenses in place, if you've got Power Automate licenses in place, and some of them haven't been assigned to the user, so they are still available. If you've got this checked, which is checked for you by default by Microsoft, those users that sign in, let's say for the first time, into a specific application, they can auto claim specific license that is made then available to them. So ideally, you don't want to have these two options here at the bottom disabled. And I do think that one of the most common misconceptions that people have about Microsoft environments is the fact that they are secure by default, which they are not. Obviously, now we've got the great initiatives coming from Microsoft with secured by default and secured by design, but we're still nowhere near a place where we want to get to in terms of those sneaky kind of settings that are still either toggled on or toggled off, where in reality it should be the other way around, right? So it's easily to get caught off guard if you're not double checking these. So it's always a good idea to go through the portal and just have a look. So again, if you follow that principle of zero trust, it's never trust, always verify, just in case.
Agree.
And then a couple of other settings that I really want to show you. So if you've recently been to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, you might have noticed that there are now dedicated panes over here on the left-hand side for Copilot and for agents as well. So this is something that was only recently added to the portal. So just to take you through what these are all about. So obviously, if we go over to the overview for Copilot, it lets you cover some of the security mechanisms and provide you with a list of recommendations for the policies that you should have in place and so on. So again, always a good idea to go through that as well. But what I really want to focus on is the settings pane on the left-hand side. So a couple of interesting things here. So for example, I just want to focus on the Opal and so Frontier and the Microsoft 365 Copilot self-service purchases. So this is directly linked to what I've shown you already, but this is specifically just for Copilot. So if you're just looking for a setting that will cover that specific product for you, this is a way how you would be able to find it within the portal as well. When it comes to the Opal or the Frontier option as well, there's a dedicated setting in here which lets you determine who can actually access that Frontier. And again, might not be something very risky, might not be something that you wish to block for the end users, but again, having that control or even knowing where that specific setting is located, I think it's really, really important as well. And then again, as a recommendation, always a good idea to go through the data access, Copilot actions, and other settings in here, because you can do really cool stuff in here in terms of restricting what can people use for the web search, both for Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot chat as well, but also Copilot in Power Platform and Dynamics 365 as well, which I think, are kind of overlooked settings that no one really is paying attention to. But the most kind of key setting in here is the one for agents. So again, we're over in the data access tab. And if I click into agents, this is a setting responsible for you trying to determine who can actually access agents within your organization. So we're talking about AI agents here, of course, and who can share those agents with anyone within your organization, and what types of applications and agents users are actually allowed to install. So let me just break it down. So over here for the setting where you can choose who can access those agents, you've got 3 options. So you either make all the users avail of that specific option, or you block it entirely, or maybe you use just a specific group as well. So in my example in here, I'm just restricting that to my administrators. So they are the only people who can use those agents. Obviously, might not be feasible for you to block it within your organization, but again, having that control and knowing where to block it and how are people actually able to use those agents, you need to have a really good understanding of that as well. Same goes for who can share those agents with anyone in the organization. But the most important ones, I think, are that choose which types of apps and agents users are allowed to install. So if you don't restrict it, obviously everything is allowed by default. And these includes apps and agents created by both Microsoft and some external publishers as well. And then last but not least, allowing apps and agents built by your organization. So ideally, if you're really worried about security and governance of those agents that you are not controlling yourself, might be a good idea to uncheck these 2 options here at the top. Cool.
Question popping up. If I have identities, which I also can give permissions, I can't limit that access in this page, right?
What specific identities are you talking about? So are these identities in terms of, I don't know, Entra ID agents?
Yeah, the workload managed identities.
So it would be under the Microsoft agents, which you cannot block if you are to allow your users to use them. So might not be feasible for the organization. But yeah, this is kind of the something that controls agents in general. So again, might not be possible for some of the organizations to limit that or to block it entirely. You probably do need to allow it, and then you need to restrict it further with the user permissions or who can share it or what types of data can actually be stored within those agents as well, and how the interactions would work or what types of data sources are actually supported and allowed within those identity agents as well.
Okay.
Cool. And then one other thing that I really want to show you as well is over here. If we look at the pane on the left, we've got a section for agents. If we go over to all agents, what it does is obviously there are a bunch of different applications or a bunch of different vendors that rely on Copilot as well. And this is what we call the Copilot extensibility. So this specific setting was located under org settings, and then there was a specific section dedicated for this, but now it's got its own kind of place within the portal that is specifically dedicated for Agent 365 and the associated settings as well. So we are all familiar now at this stage where you browse to a specific website and sometimes you get this chat box. But now, more than ever, you see those AI agents popping up as well, so that you don't need to ring them up when you're looking for a specific service. You don't need to send them a message. You can just talk to an agent on that specific site. So some of those agents actually have Copilot working in the background. And by default, all of your end users have the option to use those agents popping up in those Microsoft, but also external partners as well. So what you can do here, and again, this is something that you should be periodically checking because those agents, that number of them is constantly kind of growing. But what you can do here now is if you go through that list of all the agents, and we can see that we've got 156 of them at the moment that fully rely on Copilot. So it's Copilot running there in the background. We can then make a decision whether we do allow them for our end users or not, and also what types of permissions are we willing to grant them, and what types of data and tools we do want to control. So let's say if you want to block this specific agent that is running on Copilot, and you don't want your end users to have access to that, when you then go over to the users tab, you can then decide that no users in your organization can install it, or everyone can install it, or maybe only a specific user or a group can install it. And then again, really good idea to always go and look through all the different tabs, but the permission tabs essentially list all the kind of delegated permissions that each one of those agents, extended agents, have access to. So whether they can read your chat messages, whether they can have access to your mailbox items and so on. So again, from security and compliance point of view, this is something really, really key as well.
Yeah, I really like the console, the registry, what you're showing, which also was announced at Ignite, being it into action. This looks promising and helpful to see which permissions each agent has.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think what we would also benefit from as well is if we could bulk select them and block them or change the settings at scale, because it's not an easy task to manually go through each one of those 156 agents and change those permissions for each one of them. So it would be a good idea that maybe those permissions would be listed somewhere in here without us actually having to click through it. Again, it looks nice in the GUI, it's user friendly and so on, and it gives you that really nice breakdown of what each one of those applications is doing and what it's got access to. But I think for organizations where they want to have that full control over those applications, might be a good idea that we would have an option to either do it via PowerShell or even within the GUI, where we can make those changes at scale rather than clicking more than 200 times to change those permissions or to restrict it a little bit further. What do you
Totally
think?
agree. I dislike clicking. If I can automate it, that would be the best.
Absolutely. Great. Okay, so obviously that's just the basics for how to allow people to have access to those agents, how to allow them to grab specific licenses that are associated with the use of different types of copilots and so, or Power Automate, which you can also use for AI applications. Big part of it is obviously Purview. There are a couple of things that I want to show you guys. When we think about a data security or a data compliance, we always kind of think back to a solution within the Microsoft 365 security and compliance stack called Microsoft Purview, which is this very comprehensive, very complex suite of solutions and products. And for anyone kind of following me, you guys know that I really like Purview, and I'm all about getting you guys visibility into what types of data you guys have within your organizations and have that full control over that data as well. And I know that on this specific YouTube channel, then, and that you've got going on, you had some very great guests in the past covering Microsoft Purview as well. So I don't want to kind of repeat what they've already covered over the last few months, but just want to point out a key I suppose findings or key announcements that were part of Ignite 2025, but also some of the features that were added into the portal after the Purview oriented sessions that you had on the AZ security channel as well.
Indeed, yeah.
So I think one of the biggest kind of announcements that we got during Ignite was the fact that the data security posture management, or what we call the DSPM and DSPM for AI, actually are being merged into one solution. So anyone kind of jumping into Microsoft Purview portal, which we can find at purview.microsoft.com. If we go to solutions, we can now see that we've got a couple of different versions of those products within the admin center. So we've got a data security posture management classic. We've got a DSPM preview, which is the new version of those two kind of solutions working together. And then previously we had a DSPM for AI, which was dedicated for AI interactions, for managing your agents, your applications, and so on. So you might notice that, for example, if you've got into the DSPM preview, not all of the panes might actually be working for you right now. And you might be missing some of the key reports. So it might be a little bit inaccurate, like, for example, data investigation or data discovery. It's not really showing me much. There's like 0 results for some types of stuff. Again, the reason for that is that this specific solution is very, very new, but it's given us really exciting things to look forward to, where we will be able to go and look at our objectives. So if our objective is a data protection, when it comes to preventing data exposure, oversharing, all that type of stuff, there will be tools in here where we can provide you with a remediation plan in terms of, how to remediate some of the risks or the gaps that you've got within your current configuration as well. What's also really, really interesting in here is the AI observability as well. So this specific pane, and again, there's nothing in here because it's not currently available for some of the regions. But over here, we will be able to get a centralized view of any agent activity across your organization. So if you've got a Fabric agent in place, if you've got a Copilot Studio agent in place, if you've got like an AI Foundry agent in place, all the insights will be here in this specific dedicated centralized repository as well, which I think is really, really good from even the point of, managing those insights and having a dedicated person going through that information. What's also really useful here is the applications and agents. So now we've got a dedicated section where we can actually control each one of those agents, whether this is Copilot Studio, Copilot in Fabric, Security Copilot, or any enterprise AI applications that we might have connected. Again, I don't really want to be diving too much into it because this was something that was previously covered on the channels. But, when we look at securing AI and AI applications, we cannot mention or we cannot avoid mentioning Microsoft Purview because this is such a key thing for us. But exciting stuff happening within apps and agents. and that is currently in Purview as well, where you can set up different data protection policies and data compliance policies. So you get to determine, where that sensitive data can actually be stored. Because if people are setting up Copilot Studio, they can be grabbing sensitive files that are sitting within their OneDrive repositories and so on. But not many people actually are aware that Microsoft Purview has two dedicated policy templates specifically for AI and AI agents, which are, first of all, we've got communication compliance, which I often think that this is such an underrated solution that no one is really paying attention to, but it's becoming more and more popular now with a specific template that we've got to detect Microsoft Copilot interactions. So again, if you want to avoid a situation where your users are prompting for very specific sensitive information types, coming from your built-in or custom classifiers, and you want to be alerted about any type of an incident or a scenario where, someone is maybe asking about financial information that maybe they shouldn't be accessing, this is a good kind of way how you can fully control that. So I would always recommend that you guys go and put in this specific policy in place. The setup of it is very, very simple. So again, Microsoft tries to kind of automate and help you out as much as they can. So once you give it your policy a name, you can then grant the delegated reviewers for your policy. And if you do not wish to customize it in any way, you can just then click to create your policy, and that policy will then be created for you without you kind of having to go through any of the thresholds, any of the additional setup. But even if you were to customize it, it's very, very straightforward to set up. There's not that much kind of to it, but it gives you great benefits in terms of having that visibility and notifications and alerts when something dodgy is happening within the organization. Is there something, Denan, that you have come across before? Do you see communication compliance being deployed in many organizations these days?
Well, I always explain as MCT trainer that this is very valuable, but not a lot of people are enabling it yet. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Hopefully, with AI increasing those risks, hopefully we will see more organizations utilizing all the tools that organizations are paying for. So communication compliance is one of the products that is only available at the Microsoft 365 E5 license level, or the Purview suite, which used to be the compliance add-on. So you can have business premium, or you can have a E3 license. And then if you get the Purview suite add-on, you get to benefit from this specific template and this specific solution as well.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So another template that I wanted to show you guys today is insider risk management. So insider risk management, as the name might suggest, it sort of looks at your insider threats that you might be having within your organization. And now with the rise of AI, obviously those threats are becoming more and more serious. So insider risk management has a dedicated policy template that anyone with Microsoft 365 E5 license or similar, so again, you can have business premium or you can have E3, as long as you have that Purview suite add-on, you can benefit from it. And you can create a policy. So if we just click on create policy in here and go custom policy, there's a dedicated policy for risky AI usage. There are a couple of prerequisites to be able to deploy it. So each one of the policy templates in insider risk management will actually let you know what are some of the prerequisites that you have to cover, what is definitely required and what is only optional. And you can see here that over here, the optional prerequisite is having devices onboarded to Microsoft Purview, which again, if you are using Defender for Endpoint as your antivirus, whether it's in an active or a passive mode, you can then easily onboard your devices to Microsoft Purview as well. But those processes, those steps are completely separate. So Defender for Endpoint and Purview use the same agent for onboarding your devices to both the anti-malware solution like Defender for Endpoint and for onboarding them for the data security protection coming from insider risk management or data loss prevention. and I can show you some of the steps how to make sure that this is looked after. But the kind of the deal breaker, what you do need to have in place to be able to control and have that visibility over the AI interactions is the Microsoft Purview extension installed on all the supported browsers. So whether this is Edge, whether this is Google Chrome, whether this is Firefox, Microsoft has really great documentation that we will make sure that we provide some of the links for you guys in this video, where you can go and check it out how to deploy it. So again, the process for setting up this specific policy is again pretty straightforward, because this specific template already includes the triggering events and activities that should be within the scope of this policy. Once you define your users, who do you want to scope it to, Microsoft Purview kind of looks after the rest for you. Cool. Okay. So that's kind of Microsoft Purview. And again, there's a lot that you can achieve within Purview in terms of data security and data governance, specifically when it comes to protecting the data in those AI agents and AI applications, because we do need to remember that it's really the data that we're really worried about. It's apart from users having access to those agents have access to your crown jewels or your critical data assets, right? So we all always kind of worry about the risks of data exfiltration. So you can use your encryption within sensitivity labeling in Microsoft information protection. You can use data loss prevention for that purpose as well. But again, I'm not going to be covering them in depth, because Dominic Hermans, for example, delivered a great session for your channel, and so people can go back and watch that as well. So we might just put a link to that session as well, because it's definitely worth a watch. Awesome. Okay, so recently you also had on the channel Drake, who covered Defender for cloud applications and Defender for endpoint, and the really great additions to the portal over the last couple of months. I do really kind of want to just mention that a Defender for CloudApps, and again, you do need to have Microsoft 365 E5 license or the Defender Suite add-on if you've got a business premium or if you've got Microsoft 365 E3. But Defender for CloudApps gives you that great ability to go and discover the applications in the cloud that your users are browsing to, that your users are using. And then you can also go and see that stuff within the Cloud App Catalog as well. But again, that was mentioned during the previous session, so I won't be diving into here. But one of the main things how you can remediate some of those risks is, for example, you can create the app discovery policy within Defender for Cloud App. So if you navigate over to the Security Admin Center, which you can find at security.microsoft.com, and then you go over to the Cloud App section, and then you navigate over to the policies, policy management. Over here, if you click on create policy and then app discovery policy, you can either use a dedicated template that is built in, or you can start your policy from scratch. You can utilize different filters in that policy as well. So Microsoft kind of curates and manages a number of different applications based on that application's category. So if we are worried about Gen AI applications, then we can scope our policy to the category of those Gen AI apps. So over here, we've got a built-in option for generative AI content and those SaaS applications. But also, if we scroll down to the bottom, we've got AI MCP servers and AI model providers as well, which I always recommend bringing into your scope as well. And in this specific case, you can say that, for example, if my applications for Gen AI are not sanctioned, so if I'm not explicitly marking them as safe to use, and their built-in risk score is, for example, lower than, let's say, 6, so that risk score could be, anything between 0 and 6. Well, maybe I want to automatically unsanction them, so mark them as blocked. One of the prerequisites for using unsanctioned applications is having Defender for Endpoint in an active mode. So you do have to be careful with that. So Defender for Endpoint need to be your primary antivirus solution. So could be one of the limitations for your organizations. But if you're already using Defender for Endpoint, this is definitely something that you and your organization should be looking at as well. Is this something then that you see organizations that you deal with utilizing and fully deploying?
More and more, because there are sometimes reasons not to go for the complete ecosystem. But if you want to have the total view, as you mentioned already, viewing where your data is going and where it flows, then tools like this one definitely help in completing your view.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, after Ignite, we have noticed that what we really need in this day and age is that more of a holistic approach. So it's no longer that data security is just linked to Purview, and it's not that all threat management is just linked to Defender. You do need to have knowledge around different types of portals, so that you can actually have that full control over those agents and AI applications as well.
I agree. It's too big for one technology, so it has to work hand in hand.
Absolutely. So I just briefly just want to mention some of the other settings that I think are absolutely crucial when it comes to securing your AI agents and AI applications and are often overlooked by organizations. So Power Platform, which again you can find at admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. This is quite big because essentially this is how you manage the security and governance around Copilot Studio, around your automation flows coming from Power Automate itself, but also governing the data kind of boundaries for your AI data, or the data that is actually used within those AI applications as well. Couple of things that I really want to briefly show you. Within the security blade on the left hand side, if we go to the data and privacy in here, we've got an option here for the data policy. So this is definitely something that a lot of organizations are overlooking. So you can have the best data loss prevention policies in the world within Microsoft Purview, but that still won't stop the exfiltration that can happen within Power Platform using different connectors. So if I go in here and I just edit, you know what, I'm just going to set up a new policy just to show you guys the process for it. If you've got nothing in place, I would recommend that you go and set up your policy, because what happens here is that by default, Microsoft actually allows all the connectors that come as part of the data policy. So at the moment, we've got a 1600 connectors that are allowed by default, which means that someone can just set up a Power Automate flow. Someone can use Copilot Studio to go and use automation to exfiltrate that data outside of your organization. And it wouldn't be so bad if it was just linked to, Microsoft 365 services and stuff. But, if we were to look up, I don't know, Facebook or Instagram, you see that these are also allowed as well. So really good activity in here would be to make sure that you guys go through all the different connectors and then segregate them. So if you wish to block Facebook as a connector, you then block it and it will be moved to the blocked category as well. What you can also do, because obviously this is a point in time kind of a view, and those connectors are always being added in here. So you can go and set up your default group for the connectors that can actually be blocked as well. So you can set it that your default group for all the new connectors coming in will be the blocked category in here as well. Okay. So again, quite scary if you kind of look at what Microsoft would allow you to do by default. So again, this is something that Microsoft Purview data loss prevention does not cover at all. And another really, really key setting in here is if we go over to the Copilot blade on the left-hand side and we go over to settings, the setting that really, really scares me most of the time is the setting for generative AI settings. Because over here, if I open that app and I go over to my environments, and again, this is something that is allowed by default, if I edit this specific setting, it tells me, and again, these would be all checked by default. This tells me that I am agreeing that the data will be processed outside of my environment's geographic region and compliance boundary. So, this is kind of scary. And from the governance and compliance perspective, this is definitely something that a lot of companies, specifically in more controlled, more regulated industry, they do want to have a full control over that and prohibit that if possible. So again, one of those settings that doesn't really make sense. It's definitely not secure by default, and I would recommend that you guys go through those settings in here as well, just as well as going through all the other really important settings within Power Platform Admin Center, because there's probably about 100 different controls and options that you guys should be going through, because it's pretty wide open by default, and you do need to go and modify all those different settings in here associated with agents, authentications for agents, Copilot in Power Apps, even like auditing capabilities, which I was surprised to see the other one that they are actually disabled by default. So you cannot go over your logs from the past to see who made what changes and whatnot. So again, really, really starting point for a lot of organizations to go and see those settings within Power Platform Admin Center, because this is essentially how you control Copilot Studio as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a lot.
Absolutely. And again, you've got dedicated options for just Copilot Studio or Dynamics 365 or Power Apps, Power Pages, but this is kind of how automation works. So by default, anyone can really build an agent, and anyone can grab the data that is sitting within corporate SharePoint or OneDrive for Business with a bunch of different sensitive data that can be then fed into that agent. And if you share that agent with people outside of the organization, if you maybe share it with the wrong people because you're not really restricting access to those, that's a huge data exfiltration and a risk of unauthorized data access as well. So definitely organizations should try and stay on top of those changes and go through all those settings as well.
Well, I think that will be a nice topic for maybe for the future. Thank you very much. I think this is a lot of stuff for people to think about. Definitely love the way you've shown it, make it more practical. So I really want to thank you for your time once again, also for the great presentation.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much. And, for anyone watching, if there's anything specific that you guys would like to see, let us know in the comments as well. Let us know how you found the session, because again, feedback is important. And I'm sure Dinant would love it on his channel as well. So make sure that you go and follow him and watch the great content that he's providing for the community.
Well, thank you very much. For everybody at home, thank you for listening and for watching. Hopefully this is useful. Please leave a comment below. And for the next time, take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.